Welcome to Triptych.
Three friends having a chat
about three artistic masterpieces,
Making connections for modern life.
Welcome. We have made it to season 2. It's absolutely joyful to see you both.
Yeah, you too, Mark.
It's wonderful to see you all.
And we meet again, which is very exciting. And I thought it'd be good to kick off with just whether or not we've made any artistic discoveries over the summer, because it's been, I don't know, about 6 to 7 months that we have had off. So who would like to go first?
Okay, so I think the best thing I discovered over the summer, very, very, very late to the party, is A Secret History by Donna Tartt, the novel. I had never read it before. My daughter read it and told me I needed to read it. And I was in France with friends, and I don't usually get extended time just to kind of let my brain wander because I'm just so busy. And so it was so just lovely just to absolutely sink into a novel. It was really, really well written, really exciting, and just charming. So yeah, I loved it.
That sounds good. Well, I'll jump in. So I was on sabbatical this summer. And, I think if I had guessed before, I would have said I probably have watched a lot of movies, but I barely watched any movies, and I read a lot. One of my surprising discoveries was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. It was, it's fantasy. I realize most of the time I watch fantasy these days rather than read it. So it was nice to immerse myself in this 1,000-page novel. I was reading till my eyes were hurting, so desperate to finish the story. But yeah, it was really, really enjoyable.
Fantastic. I don't know anything about the writer or the series. So
Sanderson apparently completed the Wheel of Time.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so that's in one sense his claim to fame, which is unfortunate because his own world building is amazing.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great. For me, I would say it was a sort of podcast / audiobook, sort of hybrid about the writer Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Dirk Gently, amongst other things. And he died really quite young, nearly 25 years ago. And this is a sort of biography, sort of overview of his way of thinking, called Douglas Adams, The Ends of the Earth. And it's by a guy who actually had worked with him called Arvind Ethan David. But it's very sort of high spec production values. So it feels like a documentary with several different people brought on to discuss different things. And I had quite a lot of driving to do in the States in the summer. And so listened to this the whole time. And it was absolutely fantastic. It blew me away. It was so interesting. I've always admired him, even though being sort of nervous of his kind of, out there atheism. But actually, even that was fascinating to hear that spoken about. And just an absolute genius. So I thoroughly recommend it. I think you have to pay for it rather than just download it. But it's utterly superb. Douglas Adams, The Ends of the Earth.
My masterpiece is The Armed Man, A Mass for Peace by Sir Karl Jenkins. So this is a piece for full symphony orchestra and SATB choir. So it's a full old choir. It was written at the turn of the century, by which I mean 2000, as like a kind of message of hope. And this one's quite meaningful to me because I played it myself in 2003 for Sir Karl, who was in the audience.
You did a special performance for Karl.
Yeah, just me.
Wow.
You did all those vocal parts.
Yeah. But no, my youth orchestra was performing it and Karl came and watched.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. So it's based on like the Catholic Mass. So you have the usual kind of landmarks in it. You've got a Kyrie, an Agnus Dei, a Benedictus, but it's also got a lot of other texts, which makes it very interesting. So you've got like Psalms and Revelation in it, but you've also got the Islamic call to prayer. You've got a Hindu text from the Mahabharata, and you've got poetry by Japanese poet Sankinchi Toge, and we've got Tennyson and Kipling. So we have a whole range of different viewpoints, and they're used to quite interesting effect, I think. I think the strength is as a concept album. It kind of builds up. So tracks 1 to 6, it's kind of building up towards war. We've got this like patriotism and bravado and holy language to sanctify what's going on. Then track 7 is the battle. And then tracks 8 to 13 are the aftermath. So it's kind of like the horror, the lament, the coming to terms, and the promises to never do this again, which, never work. So I'll take us through a few of the tracks. We're not going to go through all of them, but just let's have a little whistle-stop tour. So track 1, L'homme armé, which is The Armed Man is to be Feared. It's from a 15th century folk song. And it starts with just marching feet. That's what the choir do. And it's like an army approaching from the distance. And then a piccolo solo, like a little military band kind of thing, introduces the melody. It kind of brings to mind the Crusades kind of thing, which is kind of hilarious as an aside, because I was watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail recently, and the theme, Arthur's theme, is so similar to the trumpet theme in this opening track, and it absolutely cracked me up. So like the army comes into view, and as it kind of comes into view, the music gets louder, the bass gets added, more layers and harmony upon harmony are added until the full SATB choir is bellowing their song, and the whole like orchestra is at full pelt. So you feel like encompassed in the middle. And then bam, track 2. It's just a solitary imam, Islamic call to prayer, which I think is like a really affecting reminder that on both sides of conflict, it's just people. It's just men with their beliefs. I love track 4, always used to make me laugh, because it's literally just called Save Us from Bloody Men. And all the females said amen. And then
oh boy. I didn't make that connection, but
she
all
didn't
right,
tell us
sure.
to listen to that one, Joel, did she?
Wow.
I didn't, but it just cracks me up every time I hear
Very,
it.
very British of you.
Yes, I know, very. And then track 5 is Sanctus, which is like, it's like kind of the holy, holy, holy part. But this one has a really menacing military air to it. And the use of like the trumpets is really brilliant. And they have a huge rhythmic percussion section. So that's kind of a stylistic marker of Karl's. He uses a very large percussive range. And so it's really fun. Then we have the Hymn Before Action, track 6, which is a Kipling poem. It's rousing, it's inspiring, it's got lush orchestration. It feels really like patriotic and bravado. And then track 7, that's the hinge of the whole thing, is Charge. Starts off with trumpet fanfares. It's like fast, exhilarating. You're kind of picturing Laurence Olivier as Henry V kind of style thing, with like armies on horseback, flags flying, 2 armies rushing towards each other on a battlefield, and the choir is insistently singing Charge, and then suddenly you get 8 solo drum hits and chaos. It's insanely fun to play. It's supposed to be depicting the absolute gore, horror, just chaos of war, but it's so much fun to play, because basically for that a certain number of bars you just get to do anything. The choir is literally screaming and wailing, you're just playing tremolandi on the violin, and it's just insanity. And then a gong rings and it all starts to fade until there's complete silence, and the conductor cues in someone playing the last post. So it's really quite extraordinarily effective. And then the tracks after that are kind of dealing with the aftermath. So Angry Flames is using the poetry of Sankichi Toge, who survived the initial blast of Hiroshima. And then Torches is from the Mahabharata, describing animals fleeing a burning wood. But it really directly translates to humans escaping the aftermath of a bomb. And it's got these brutal lines saying, some hugged their sons, others their fathers and mothers, unable to let them go, and so they died. They breathed their last as human torches. And all of the orchestration, the lush orchestration, is gone. It's really discordant. It's uncomfortable to listen to. It's just very dramatic. And then the last few tracks, they're kind of overplayed. You've got the Benedictus, which Classic FM can't stop playing, and I get bored of it. And last track, which is a bit weak, to be honest. So I don't think the whole thing is, the whole thing isn't amazing, but there's some real high points to it. And I think he's kind of bringing this kind of mass and considering different viewpoints for a mass audience. So what did you guys make of it?
Well, first of all, thank you, because, one of the things I'm enjoying about doing this podcast is I'm exposed to things that I probably would not search for on Spotify.
Yeah, who would?
Just not in a million.
Yeah.
It was something to listen to. Especially when I got headphones on and was able to listen to it properly.
Mm-hmm.
just the dynamics again was fascinating. And I can imagine hearing that live and just how affecting it would be. I listened to it a couple of times and just kind of getting used to the soundscape and what's going on, and looking at some of the lyrics and trying to understand the storyline running throughout it. Torches was very impactful, and you're just kind of picturing scenes of the devastation after, like an explosion or something. The way they harmonize the last post towards the end also is fascinating, because I'm just used to hearing the last post, just the bugle by itself. So to hear the strings come in and now just harmonize that in a way that I think really expressed the mournfulness of this piece of music. Yes, it was definitely thought-provoking. And again, I thought interesting to use a Catholic mass to kind of process through a century of war. I thought, can't remember the last time I've listened to a Catholic mass. I did get exposed to them when I was studying music. But yeah, it was interesting to see how those forms were being used to tell the story. So yeah, definitely interesting and thought-provoking.
How about you, Mark?
It's interesting because I hadn't listened to the whole thing through before, so I was really glad to do that. And there were one or two tracks that actually, it's one of those pieces you think, oh, I've heard that, but never been able to play. So it gets used in all kinds of things, doesn't it? It's often used in adverts and other soundtracks. So giving it context was great, because I had never known where it was from. And Karl Jenkins, he does have a knack for writing something that's really catchy, but is also accessible. And that is not to disparage it at all. So
No.
there was something about this that was very immediate and kind of visceral, particularly, with the battle stuff, as Joel was saying. So I think, I was impressed and swept up in it. And, I could really see what he was trying to do. And I see why people love it. It really, it grabs you.
I mean, to me, sometimes it feels a bit like Lloyd Webber does a mass at times, not trying
I
to
see
be
what you mean. I get you. Yeah.
Although, funnily enough, Lloyd Webber has done one. But anyway, there we are.
And funnily enough, in my research, I saw that Karl actually played the keyboards for Jesus Christ Superstar. So it's all a rich tapestry.
Oh, wow.
Well, there you go.
So, it is kind of, it has that populist thing to it. So that's why I think elements of it are weaker than others, but there is also something about it which is massively immediate and accessible and like really beautifully done. And I really enjoyed, the different kind of ways he did that.
I appreciated the accessibility. As somebody who doesn't listen to a lot of classical music, I felt like, oh, but wait, I'm hearing themes. I can connect with this. It doesn't feel highbrow in that sense. Like I'd have to be steeped in this genre to appreciate what's going on. So yeah, I got that, and I'm like, yeah, I guess if you wanted to compose something for a wider audience, I think in some ways you may end up sacrificing some elements that you could have had otherwise.
Yeah.
And what I was really interested in is the fact that he's using a medieval precedent. So there were a number of masses in the Middle Ages called l'homme armé. So they take this, which is obviously a melody that was sort of commonly used around Europe, I imagine. And so there are a number of medieval plain song and polyphony masses called the armed man masses. So he's updating that. So he's in a long sort of line of tradition. So that was really fascinating. And yet what he produced was something that could only have been contemporary. So he's clearly someone who knows his place in the grand sweep of musical history, which is really interesting. I think if I was being picky, no, not so much picky is
Do it.
He's not the first to do this kind of thing as a protest against war. So Benjamin Britten's War Requiem does that and takes the Latin Mass, Requiem Mass, but also brings in First World War poets like Wilfred Owen and co, and uses soloists to counterweigh what's going on in the liturgy. And the other thing that he did in the Requiem, War Requiem, was to use It was written for a Russian soprano, an English tenor, and a German baritone
Oh, wow.
as the three soloists. Post Second World War, it was an incredibly poignant and potent symbol of reconciliation after the most devastating conflict. So I felt that has much greater power and bite to it than this.
I mean, undoubtedly. And I think if you look at like Goretzky, who did his Symphony of Sorrowful Songs, which is dealing directly with like the aftermath of World War II and text and stuff from the time. Like, again, but I think the point is it is for more of a mass audience, which I think the Britain one still isn't, even though it's beautiful. I don't think it's as accessible as what Uncle Karl is doing for us here.
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
We can argue about it later.
Yeah, we will.
My masterpiece is Into the Wild. It's a 2007 film directed by Sean Penn. It's based on a 1996 nonfiction book by the journalist John Krakauer. It stars Emile Hirsch as a young American who kind of disaffected young man post-college who basically up and decides he wants to leave the life he has. He completely disconnects from his family, doesn't communicate with them, and he heads from his home or after college on the East Coast over to the West Coast of the U.S. to have all these adventures, and has his sights set on heading to Alaska and just living off the land for a number of months before coming back. So the film, which is beautifully shot, by the way. I mean, one of it, there are a couple of, I think, points of great appeal. And one is just the cinematography and just how beautifully they portrayed just from the desert to the Alaskan wilderness in snow as it moves through spring into summer. And then the soundtrack is another element of it. Eddie Vedder, who the lead singer of Pearl Jam, apparently he and Sean Penn are close, and Sean Penn reached out to him when he finally got permission to make this film and asked him to do the music for it, or to do some of the music for it and write some original songs. And apparently these songs led to Vedder's first solo album. So you have this beautiful cinematography. You have just this music which is helping to tell the story and pull you in. And the story itself is captivating. It's heartbreaking. It's really affecting. I mean, I was telling you guys after watching it, it took me the evening and into the next day just recovering from the film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought Hirsch's performance was brilliant. I mean, it was to the point that I forgot he was portraying a character, and it was entirely believable. I thought he was Christopher McCandless, and I had to remind myself halfway through the film, wait, this is a film. You're not actually watching the story. And I think it's tremendous when actors are able to do that, when you lose any sense of them playing a role and you entirely buy into this. And some amazing supporting performances, notably by Hal Holbrook, who plays an older man in the film.
What a guy.
Entirely credible, entirely believable, just an affecting performance. Yeah, and very interesting themes throughout, battling with materialism and kind of what the world has become, people's expectations, broken relationships in family, the meaning of life. You see McCandless wrestling with what life really is about and searching for meaning. He clearly had an adventurous spirit. And quite interestingly, the author himself was also an adventurer. And I think that's probably why he was drawn to that. He apparently hiked Everest and climbed Everest and did a number of outdoorsy things and lived and I think he himself lived in the Alaskan wilderness for a number of weeks, clearly with more supplies than McCandless ended up carrying with him. But the story is tragic also. So it's this mixture of beautiful and tragic. And I think that's why it's so emotionally involving. And that's as much as I'll say for now. So what did you guys make of it?
Well, I was a blubbering wreck the first time I saw it, and the second time I saw it. So that is an indication, I think, something of its power. I think what's particularly heartbreaking is that he so almost succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of willing there to be another way, that actually, somebody comes across his path towards the end, or that there is, just a turn, but it never comes. And he's, I don't know, are we giving away plot spoilers? I suppose.
Well, here's the
hard
thing.
to avoid,
really.
really.
I think you go into this film, I think almost anyone goes into this film knowing that he dies.
He dies, yeah.
So I don't think that spoils it, but
No.
it does make the journey. I think you attach to the journey in a different way because of that.
Right.
Because on one hand, sometimes when you know a character dies, you want to detach from them, but it's impossible to do in this film.
Yeah.
So I think the tragedy of it and your yearning. I mean, at one stage, I almost swore off films that were based on true stories because they're always bad. It's just like, come on, this is just going to end badly, isn't it? In a fictional story, exactly what you want would happen, Mark. Someone would come along and save him in the end, and he'd come out having learned all these lessons.
Right.
But there is this poignance to it all because he dies in the end, and you're like, what was it all for?
Yeah.
It leaves you really wrestling with the questions that he was wrestling with.
I watched it by myself on the plane to Nashville last month, which was a mistake because I'm sat there with strangers, and it was absolutely just so gripping, but also harrowing, and I felt like I had whiplash by the end of it. I was just like, "Holy moly, what just happened to me?" I mean, he was just. Yeah, it was so great, but also he irritated me at the same. I mean, I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him he was loved. He was learning the lessons through the connections he was making along the way. But he's just this tragic, idealistic fool. He's just so naive. He kind of writes to his friend just before he goes to his his final trip to Alaska. He's like, I've stocked all necessary comforts. I'm like, but you haven't. Is it the last person to see him alive was so concerned for his welfare, they literally give him their own gumboots, So I'm just it's just the naivety is just even though he obviously lasted a whole lot longer than I would, which would be 1 day max.
It's naivety and recklessness, isn't it?
It's so reckless, and it's just so frustrating. I want to hug him and be like, dude, you've got a lot of parental issues and childhood trauma. Maybe work this out in therapy rather than, doing this insane wilderness adventure, which is going to kill you, And it's so sad because there's so many amazing moments of connection where I'm like, why can't you see this is what it's all about? I love it when he goes to the place, the little kind of squatter's place in California.
Mm-hmm.
And he meets Leonard, and he's the outsider artist who does the painting called Salvation Mountain, which is a real thing. I actually follow their Instagram account now because it's phenomenal. When it has all these amazing artwork on the mountain by this man Leonard, and he was just everyone in the world is loving me, and I want to have the wisdom to love them back. And I'm like, listen to him. That's what he's saying. He was just he was like, this is a love story that's staggering to everybody in the whole world, that God really loves us a lot. And he's met all these people, but he still kind of thinks, no, being by myself in Alaska is the answer. So I felt so frustrated with him, going, dude, this is just therapy. That you need, not cutting yourself off from everybody.
Yeah, I resonated with that kind of feeling too. Just kind of wanting to hug him, wanting to strangle him, wanting to slap him.
Yeah,
you're like, come on, wake up, because
This
in
is how
his
Joel
attempt,
does his pastoral ministry, by the way.
Yeah.
look, we're not getting into this today. I will admit to feeling those feelings at times,
Leaving it,
not
it
actually
stops right there.
to acting them out. but yeah, you're watching somebody who you're right. It's almost like it's amazing the way alongside just the cinematography and this great outdoors, just when he was working in the grain refinery and in those fields and these beautiful scenes, there are all of these relationships he runs into, all these relationships he makes along the way while he's running away from relationships that clearly bring so much meaning into his life, and he's bringing meaning into the lives of others. And you want him to wake up and realize, okay, I realize you're running from a lot of pain, but you're also finding family in all these relationships with strangers,
And that's literally what, the Ron, the character of Ron, who wants to adopt him, and it's like the most beautiful friendship. He literally says to him, like, son, what the hell are you running from? You know? And I'm like, listen to him. He knows you're running away from something. Come on. And it's just so painful when you know where the story's going.
It's
desperate.
like that old illustration that sometimes preachers use of the guy who's praying for a miracle, and God sends him all these different people in his life, and he ignores them because they're not supposedly miraculous.
Right.
And then he gets, completely disenchanted. And, all the way along, Chris is finding the answers, but it's so agonizing because I guess it's partly the idea of someone who has a very fixed, sort of predetermined idea of what he needs and what he's looking for. And so it doesn't occur to him when it hits him right in the face that actually, no, you've already found it.
Right.
But that's what's so agonizing.
Yeah. And it doesn't occur to him until too late when
He's dying.
After isolation, he realizes, wait a minute. And he says, he writes in his book, happiness is only real when shared.
Right.
It's like he finally gets the fact that he wants to go back to his life, and now he can't. And it's almost a metaphor, because now the river he crossed to get into the wilderness has swollen with all the snow melting, and he can't cross the river to go back to where he came from. It's such an affecting moment, such a tragic moment, the heartbreak. And again, Hirsch did such a good job of acting the scene, and you feel his frustration and his desperation. And it's like, oh, wow, you finally got it, but it's too late.
In fact, I found a sort of extended version of that quote, Joel. It's quite interesting. He says, and I think this is from the book, obviously, the solitude stripped away illusions, yet it showed me in the starkest clarity the truth that joy is not complete until it is given and received in love.
Wow.
And it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
He also must have lost a phenomenal amount of weight for that film, because he looked so gaunt by the end.
40 pounds, apparently. And he's not a big guy.
Okay, so basically just what the average woman does for every film that she appears in. But, it's still impressive.
I feel like we're going back to the Armed Man and that track that we're not going to talk about.
Good. Well, that's another good note on which to conclude this segment. So Godric of Finchale was a real person in medieval England, and he lived roughly between 1070 and 1170, which I don't think means he lived for 100 years, but he lived to a ripe old age. He was actually born in Norfolk, but he dies in County Down at a place called Finchale on the River Wear. Now, he'd been a merchant and then was possibly involved in the First Crusade in some way, and then later on becomes a hermit and lived in a cave by the river, and after his death became a popular saint, particularly in the north of England, although that was never actually made official. But his life story was recorded by a monk called Reginald, and that account exists in the archives. Now, so far, so good. Frederick Buechner is an American novelist, writer, and minister. He was a Presbyterian minister. he remembers picking up just a little guidebook, I guess, to medieval saints, not with a view to anything in particular, but he picks this up, just starts leafing through, and somehow this story of Godric just jumps off the page at him, and he's gripped so much that he wants to write a novel. And the focal point is Godric in his old age, having to engage with this young guy, Reginald, who's a monk, who's sort of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and there on the orders of the Bishop of Durham to write a biography, a life. But the heart of this novel is human nature and the realities of growing old and what it's like as you look back on your life, how you deal with your conscience. And Godric is horribly aware that he's done some pretty awful things over his life. So he's by no means a perfect man. But of course, Reginald is under orders and his instincts are to write what's often called a hagiography. Now, the aim of these hagiographies, I mean, literally it means the writing about a holy one or a saint, was to make these saints out to be, real models to aspire to, without any of the kind of modern revisionism that we go into in the 20th century. We want to find the warts and all. Well, this is the absolute opposite of that. And so now the word hagiography is quite interesting in the way its modern usage is that it's just writing with all the dark stuff cut out. All the warts and all are removed, and so it's like a photoshopped life in a way. Now that doesn't sound like the makings of a great novel, but the amazing thing is that it really is. The novel came out in 1980 and was shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize the following year in 1981, and I've read it more than once, so probably 3 times now. And it gets me every time. It's short. It doesn't take long to read. And it's a man wrestling with his conscience, his memories, and the fact that he's desperately trying to get Reginald to include the realities. He doesn't want to sort of, whitewash. He wants the real picture because that's how it is. He doesn't want it to be just papered over and ignored. Because in some ways, and here's the irony, isn't it, that actually the more rounded the picture is, the more it can function as a model of somebody who's wrestling, and it actually is more helpful. But that's another point. But the book is written in a kind of Anglo-Saxon voice, which is what's so amazing that a 20th century American is doing it. But it has all the kind of idioms and feel of that. I think it has one of the best opening lines of any novel I know. Let me just read the first line. 5 friends I had, and 2 of them are snakes. And you read that and you think, okay, is that a metaphor or what? And you suddenly realize, no, it's not a metaphor. 2 of them, his mates were these 2 snakes, and they even had names. And then, but there's another quote, and I'll finish with this as a sort of intro. But here he is talking to Reginald. And he says, there's much better you're not to know, I say, but know you this. No Godric's no true hermit, but a gadabout within his mind, a lecher in his dreams. Self-seeking he is, and peacock proud, a hypocrite, a ravener of arms and dainty too, a slothful, greedy bear, not worthy to be called servant of the Lord when he treats his servants, such as he himself, like dung, like Reginald. All this and worse than this go say of Godric in your book. So how did you find this very unusual and odd book?
It certainly was unusual and odd, but so brilliantly written. I mean, I've never read him before, but he is such a good writer. I mean, some of the turns of phrase. I mean, I think it's impressive when a writer brings you into a story and is teaching you and shaping you within the story, shaping ideas. So just I rarely mark up novels, but I was just just had a pen for this one and just underlining lines. I think the part you just read, I was doing some research and I realized what you just read apparently is from the history, what he said about himself.
Oh, okay. Hadn't
Yeah,
realized that.
so there are just a few things that came from the history, and apparently that quotation was written in the history itself.
Ha! So that made it past Reginald then.
Apparently, yeah, which is interesting because Reginald, certainly in the novel, is working really hard to
Yeah.
just
to
paint Godric
sanitize
in,
him. Yeah.
yes, the most saintly light he could. I found the world he built again. I mean, I didn't live back then, but clearly not. But it felt compelling. It felt real. It felt like he really captured the ethos of that time. And again, I think it's told in this first person narrative. And there are a lot of things like I would recoil from in terms of even the religious world of that time, but he just tells the story and you're kind of like, okay, I guess that's how it was. The relics, the portrayal of Rome was fascinating. Again, the portrayal of Jerusalem and even how in Godric's eyes, Jerusalem was a shining city. And you think to yourself, but could it have been that different from Rome? Kind of. So there was a realism at that point in his portrayal of Rome as he went through, and then Jerusalem was just kind of idolized in that sense. His portrayal of Godric's, I guess, his religious conversion was very affecting.
Yes.
And I think he captures the mystery of it in a wonderful way, where Godric himself doesn't understand what's happening to him, but he has this way of describing how when he went into the Jordan, the Godric that went into the Jordan and the Godric that came out were two different men. I also found it interesting the way he told the story, because it wasn't told in this kind of linear way from youth to old age, just straight. He's jumping back and forth, and the conversations with Reginald.
Which is how memory works, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. But it was a very effective way of telling the story, because at a point you think, okay, I know where this is going. And then bam, oh, I didn't know we were going here. How did we get?
Yeah.
Oh, my word. What just happened?
Yes. Right.
Like to be able to do that in a novel
Yeah.
is amazing. I mean, I think all good novelists have that kind of twist, and not just the climax of the novel, but something you did not see coming at all.
Yeah.
And he did that very effectively.
Sophie, had you read it before?
No, I've not read it before. I have come across Buechner's writing in terms of like quotations and things like that, but I'd never actually read anything long form. So I was again really blown away. It's again not often that I am rushing to make notes just from a turn of phrase that has so captured something of my own, I don't know, experience of life and spirituality. And there was so much, and I loved how there was always this hilarious tension with Reginald, who's like desperately trying to record him as the saint he kind of wants him or believes him to be.
Is there something funny about the fact that he's called Reginald? I don't know.
Yes, I think that is also funny. It's a funny name. And Godric's like desperately like putting on his worst behavior just to like prove like no. And I do love, like, you do get the sacred and the profane like next to each other all the time, showing that that there is a work of like deep spiritual reckoning happening in this man's heart, but he's also still just this kind of like filthy man. There's one bit where he's had the vision of Saint Cuthbert on Lindisfarne, and it's insane. Like, so he has this vision, and he's left with the words, "Where your treasure is, there shall your heart be also," and that's immediately followed by the lines, "The boatman's foot was in my ribs. Rise up, man, or else the birds will shit you white as Farn Rock." And it's just like the absolute contrast of suddenly he's woken up from this spiritual reverie by this like kind of coarse boatman shaking him awake, like, get up. And I just thought it just really encapsulates everything about Godric, these things side by side. And I kind of found it deeply comforting to see this kind of way that this flawed human relates to God, knowing full well who he is. And I just, that yeah, it was just really, really beautiful. Like there's this one bit where he's kind of going to visit some of the people who are all kind of crowding to see this hermit, believing that he can heal them. And he's kind of talking to God in his head as he's seeing these peasants going, feed them with something more than Godric here, for Godric's no less starved for thee than they.
Yeah.
Have mercy, Lord. You know, he's just like, I don't know what you're looking at me for, because I need God as much as you do. You know, but then you get to that one particular section at the end of the book, the incest bit. Whoo boy, I did not see that coming. I mean, I had hints of it and I thought, no, he's not going to go. And so it's kind of horrendous. And there's the death of another character as a direct result of that. It's just awful. And I found that really hard to kind of grapple with, in the sense that I've accepted he's a deeply flawed person. He knows he is. But there is something about this particular act. It just makes me think of like all of the kind of scandals around the church, you know, and how we view people who have fallen in this like sexual way, and how it completely alters how we view them, and what do we do with the things that they've said that are true. And that kind of, that made me feel that way towards Godric, you know. I was just like, I don't know what to do with that, because like it
Isn't that's precisely the point, though? I think.
Yeah, I mean, yes,
because the world has no mechanism. The world has no means by which to do justice and mercy together. It's only the Christian gospel that can do that. And so in the end, it's only God that can handle this.
Yeah, because it was deeply uncomfortable.
Yep.
But nevertheless, I still like related to him massively as well.
And there's no condoning of it, is there?
No, not at all.
It has terrible consequences.
Terrible consequences, and like everyone involved is like altered forever, you know. So there is no condoning, but it's a big event to happen, and I wasn't kind of expecting it, and but I think Buechner does deal with it very well. I mean, just the whole themes of it, there's so much like aestheticism going on, you know, there's so much denial and stuff, and there's, you know, and it's kind of frustrating because part of me is just like, oh, why don't you kind of, I don't know. I want him to be less about the crazy punishing of himself and more of the like, can't you just like understand?
But don't you think
you're
it makes sense of that? Because it was such an extreme thing. It makes sense psychologically of why
he's
nothing else
himself.
will do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and they both punish themselves. But it just makes me really sad because I'm like, you know, a sense of, you know, I don't know, forgiveness from both of them, a simple resting in the God who loves them. Isn't that a better way than just to kind of go into this harsh denial of everything? I don't know.
Actually, it was after the incest that it finally made sense of the asceticism. Because at first I was like, well, why would you do that to yourself? Why would you live this way? And then it's like, oh my goodness. Yeah, that sense of, it's not just the doing penance, it's the, I must protect the world from me type of approach to things. And so while I would not recommend it, I felt like I understood it.
You understood it.
Yeah, I felt like it made sense now.
Because it's interesting when he stays with the other hermit for a little while before he becomes one himself. Like he notes, and I thought it was a really interesting thing that he notes. He said he'd lived so long in pain and penitence. I feared when his time for bliss came round at last, he'd find he'd lost the art. You know, because I'm like, and that's what it feels like is happening. You know, I don't know, like all of that kind of harsh denial. And it's kind of trying to balance like understanding who God is and who we are, but there's still joy and bliss to be had. So I don't know, but it was brilliant. I love a book that can provoke me so thoroughly. It was brilliant.
We've had a novel about a medieval guy. We've had a film about an adventurer who's having sort of late teenage angst and then dies. And then we've had a mass for war. So there couldn't possibly be anything that they have in common, could there? Well, As a matter of fact, I think there just might, but I would just like to say, to repeat at the outset, as we did in the previous season, this really isn't a stitch up. We don't plan on any overlaps at all. And yet, well, what do you two feel?
This one, at first, it was baffling me. I was just like, where are we going to go with this? But yeah, I think I'm beginning to see some connections. I think in the first place, between the novel and the film, there's an interesting flirtation between truth and fiction. Obviously, Buchner, how do you pronounce that name?
Buechner.
Again.
Buechner.
I think the German pronunciation is different. But anyway.
Yes, it would be. It'd be sort of Buechner.
Yes. Well, I can't do German. So, yeah. So Buechner took just the little history, maybe legend, that's left from Godric's life, and he just freely painted a portrait of his own telling. It's interesting when you think about Into the Wild, because the original novel, the original novel was written based on interviews and McCandless's journal that was found, but the movie is so much more of a full telling of this man's life, and you have all of this conversation that has been created between him and characters, and you're like, okay, this is a true story, but how much of this is actually how it happened? So you realize both the writer of the novel and in the movie, they're taking a lot of creative license to fill in around actual events. And so I think they're very similar in that they become vehicles for the story that wants to be told by the author, and not so much for what actually
So they're
happened.
both doing Reginald's.
Yes. Yeah. Quite interestingly. Well done there, Mark.
I just wanted to say the name again.
It's a wonderful name. Yeah, so they're both saying, they're both commentaries on lives that are based on actual events, but are now infused with the author's own perspective on those events.
Great.
Yeah, and we were just talking just before, and producer Owen had a great insight, which I have to share. Because Joel and I were talking about one of our favourite lines in Godric is the line, "What's friendship when all's done but the giving and taking of wounds?" Which is a phenomenal line, and like that's shown throughout Godric. We see the kind of the wounding of the people that he loves the most, and the same back to them. And again, in Into the Wild, we see this kind of, he's so wounded by his parental figures, and yet he has these kind of moments of connection with these new people, but he ends up injuring himself and wounding those around him by removing himself from that friendship. And then in The Armed Man, Owen said, what is war but the giving and receiving of wounds? Again, it's just this kind of constant wounding of each other, and that's just the kind of the human condition that is just present in all of this, in all of us, and in all of the masterpieces. This human condition of just wounding each other in pain. And I thought it was also interesting. There's another line in Godric which I thought relates as well. Godric says, "God's love is all gift, for God has need of naught. But human folk love one another for the way they fill each other's emptiness." So again, it's that kind of, we have emptiness in us, which we need to fill. And we kind of both kind of receive, but also take from other people what we want and what we need. And that is like, so, it's so key in Into the Wild. He has this emptiness, which he thinks can be filled with solitude, but actually it can't be. It can only be filled with true connection and love. And again, in The Armed Man, like the solution is always like, let's fight it out. But that's never the solution. We end up these like cycles of violence, which end up with like all of these promises and laments to never repeat the cycle. But they always do.
I mean, isn't that the naivety of The Armed Man? That, and what Karl Jenkins is innovating there is a very late 20th century solution is let's get all the religions in. Let's get the Hindu, the Imam Muslim, the poet, the Japanese Holocaust, the atomic bomb survivor, and so on. it is a kind of naive assumption that if we just listen to people who are different from us,
Everybody.
that'll be enough. But that's not enough. And each of these three, in their different ways, has just a totally unrealistic expectation of what is missing from life. And I suppose certainly in Buechner's telling, Godric is the only one who begins to come to some sort of resolution of that. Maybe because he's the old one, in contrast to Chris McCandless in Into the Wild, who's what, 20 or whatever, the opposite end of life. So there is a difference, but they both retreat into the wilderness.
It's interesting. I mean, I guess two themes that I think just run throughout is the longing for peace, which you hear so clearly at the end of The Armed Man. In the midst of all of this, just there's this longing for peace, and that I don't remember if this was you're saying the last track 13, I think it is, you didn't like so much, but it does set that Revelation text, that Revelation is it 22
it does.
text. And you hear in that this longing for peace. You see that in Godric's journey, this longing for peace, especially in his later years now when he's isolated himself and he's tortured by his memories. And he does such a wonderful job of just painting the picture of this old man looking back, wondering how could his life could have been different if he had taken a left instead of a right at this particular crossroads. But there's a longing for peace. And then in Into the Wild, too, there's a longing for peace that's going on here. What's interesting is that in Into the Wild, it leads him to detach from everyone, hoping to find peace in solitude. And it's not happening. It's not working. The other connection here is there's this fascinating exploration in both Godric and Into the Wild of spirituality and life as it is. So let me read a passage from Godric. This is late in the book when he's reunited with his family, and his mother Edwin started to talk about her life, and he's now sharing his newfound faith or the faith he has found over the years with her. And she says, Godric, she said, I'll tell you this. I've labored all my life. I've baked and brewed. I've woven, spun, and dyed. I've kept my husband's house and raised his young, and many other things beside. So where was the time for holiness? What strength was left for faith? Let monks and nuns and priests have care of that. The dead shall rise. The Lord himself will sit as justicer in manor court. It may be true for all I know, but in the meanwhile, bread, beer, work, and rest at night, they're truth enough for me. And it's such a contrast to McCandless's character, who doesn't see any meaning in any of this. Well, I mean, it's somewhat of a contrast because she's saying this has filled my life and I've had no time for matters of faith. He's trying to find himself and find meaning by escaping all of the structures of his life. She's embraced all of that and poured out her life for others, but struggled with that in a certain sense because it's consumed her entirely. And he's abandoning all of that to try to find meaning. And it's like, wow, what a contrast between two characters, but both of whom are lost in a certain way.
Although I think it's kind of sad that she views it that way because, like it makes it out that this kind of spirituality is only possible with a complete setting apart from like being a monk or a nun or a hermit. Whereas like there's actually, joy and love and connection and God to be found in the things that she's describing, in the raising of kids and the taking care of a family,
which is a rediscovery of the Reformation, isn't it?
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not that it hadn't been there before. There were times in church history where people got it, but it had been lost because of this sacred secular divide.
Yeah, but weirdly enough, it's I was saying it's a contrast, but also it's a connection between the two of them because he's leaving all of this to find what he thinks is a real meaning of life. He doesn't want to get caught. There's a quotation about career being an invention, a 20th century invention, and it's just this idea that no, I don't want to get caught in all of that. I feel like I'll lose myself in a certain way. But as you say, the actual truth of it is life is found there. Life is found in all of those relationships. Faith is found in all of those places. But both of these characters have missed that.
I just think it's because there's always such a tricky intertwining of the good and the bad, because, I think Chris McCandless is just terrified of the kind of the materialistic outlook that he sees in the world, and that is something, to be marked and avoided, just the pointless pursuit of things and money and prestige. But they're, not necessarily, bad things in and of themselves. People have to work. People have to, make money to support their families, so it's kind of like trying to
I think it's further than that, though, because I think
yeah, go.
What he's reacting to is what capitalism and consumerism have done to people.
Yes.
And so the assumption is, if we just ditch the big isms, which means ditch having stuff, which means getting back to some kind of, pre-fall paradise, then we will find ourselves, it'll be restored. It's very sort of Rousseau that actually we are born with these things, and then it's just society that has screwed us up. But I think the film profoundly shows how wrong that is, and exposes just the deep flaw in that sort of Enlightenment thinking, that actually the reality is we find ourselves through our connections with other people who are just as flawed and screwed up as we are, but we muddle our way through. And I think that's the thing that is so beautiful about Godric, is that he helps us to see that it is precisely in facing his own darkness that he comes to some kind of resolution. So it's not just, I think, him just sort of trying to get Reginald to tell the truth. It's because it's in Reginald's interests for his own sake.
McCandless is just reacting to the warring he sees in his parents, and he's just desperately trying to get away from that, and that's what he's reacting to and thinking that is the kind of definitive outcome of these things. Whereas, like, you'd think he'd see that from the other people he meets, that that there are alternatives, and two, even with the people that he meets along the way, they still have their own issues and problems, and like the couple, they have their issues that kind of need repairing. So it's about humanity rather than the circumstances we find ourselves in,
warts and all.
Yeah.
Joel, would you like a last word?
I'm encouraged by just engaging with these masterpieces. I realize often, I think in the busyness of life, I can use film or reading or whatever as escapism. And these were not escapist pieces at all. These drew you in and demanded just emotional real estate in your heart. But it's been so helpful to just be thinking through with these writers, with these authors, with these composers, and just kind of feeling what they want you to feel. And it becomes a kind of lens to reflect on life. And I realize I've been struggling with the messiness of relationships. And I feel more encouraged because I do think, sort of like Reginald, we long for a sanitized version of things. Yes. We long for people to be cleaned up in a way that's complete and absolute, and we struggle with the brokenness in ourselves and others. And I do feel like there's an encouragement here that that's not the path. The path is going to come through embracing what it's like now. Yet there is hope. And you see Godric holding on to that hope in God. You see even in the armed man holding on to hope that there's a peace that we can't deliver, that we will experience eventually. And in McCandless, even in the tragedy of his learning the lessons too late, you realize, but lessons can be learned. So it's like he becomes an object lesson for others who would become idealistic and go off on a path that's not helpful, that doesn't lead you where you want to go, and realize, no, but where I am is where actually where I need to be.
Sophie, That was a lot of last words. You can have.
I already
fewer.
had my last. I already had my
okay.
last word. I'm
Okay,
done.
fine.
I got
Great.
nothing to add.
Well, I think that's been a fantastic start to season 2. I've really enjoyed that conversation. Thanks so much, chaps. See you next time.
See ya. Bye from me.
That's bye from me.
Goodbye. That was Triptych, hosted by me, Mark Mennell, with Joel Bain in Jamaica and Sophie Killingly in the UK, with tech and editorial expertise from Owen Feetham. Visit our website at triptychpod.com, that is triptychpod.com, for episode show notes, background information and various links. Please do get in touch with any questions, comments and even suggestions for future episodes. And if you've enjoyed this, please do share it around and rate us wherever you get your podcast.